All right. Hey there, and welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about dating someone with relationship OCD. And so in this episode, what I want to do is cover some kind of just broad tips, to have a successful relationship if your partner has relationship OCD. And so in the last episode, I talked about, what to do if you're the one actually experiencing relationship OCD. And in this episode, this is kind of specifically for the partners and significant others, because, at the end of the day, in a relationship with two people, each person is going to struggle, right? If OCD is involved. Like, OCD doesn't just impact the individual, it impacts the family and the loved ones as well. And so it's important that you know what to do and that you have your own support as well, which is why I wanted to take the time to make this episode. And so this episode obviously also operates under the assumption that your partner has been diagnosed with OCD and has relationship OCD, right? This isn't meant for you to diagnose your partner and change your partner and all that. What we're doing here is we're operating under the assumption that your partner has been clinically diagnosed with OCD, specifically relationship OCD, and or at least that's one of their subtypes. And this is a way for you to know how to support them and how to support the relationship as a whole. And so tip number one that I really want to start out with is this idea of you as the partner understanding what OCD is and what the treatment process for OCD is, right? So, with OCD, we have the four components, right? You have the obsession or the intrusive thought, you have the anxiety, the compulsion, and then the relief. And this just works in that cycle, right? And it's really important that you understand how that cycle works with your partner and what their specific fear is, as well as what their compulsions are, right? Because what happens with relationship OCD is the significant other, right? You, in this case, if you're dealing with someone, if your partner, has OCD, you can often become the compulsion for that person, right? So if your partner is coming to you and you are reassuring them again and again and again on something, right? Or if they're analyzing something about the past again and again, and they keep coming to you for that question. If you're answering the same question multiple times, right, on a week in, week out basis, chances are that could be a compulsion that your partner's doing. And what we need to understand is, while it might make your partner feel better, right, on a short-term basis, it's actually making their OCD worse over the long run, and they're getting worse over time, right? And that's the paradox of OCD, is that if we make the person, feel better, or if the person's looking for that short-term relief, what it's going to be is this long-term distress, right? And if we're able to have some short-term distress, that's going to be long-term healing, right? And that's the paradox of the treatment with ERP. But so once you understand OCD and understand your role in that person's OCD, especially if it's relationship, if you do anything that reinforces, the first part is to really make sure that you're not reinforcing anything, right? And you're not serving as a compulsion, because while it might work in the short term, it's just going to make for a very stressful relationship over the long term, and to the point where it could get damaged beyond repair in many cases. And I have watched relationships do this with clients where the partner just keeps reinforcing, and not that it's the partner's fault. The person with OCD is responsible for their recovery, of course, but as the partner, you need to understand if you're reinforcing something, because if you don't realize that, it will just keep going in this loop, and eventually it'll burn you out. You'll just get to the point where you're just done with answering these questions and reinforcing it, because it will never be enough for OCD. It's insatiable, right? And so that's the first part, right? Really understanding it, and then part two is not reinforcing it. The second thing that I want to say is, we need to understand the lens of OCD. And if your partner is dealing with OCD, one, we need to understand it's really serious and they need to be getting help, because if they're not getting help, chances are it's going to get worse. And and understanding that it is serious, but it's also something that's treatable. And it's not your partner's defining characteristic, right? I mean, if it's something they struggle with, it's like anyone, no human being is perfect, right? So one thing I would encourage is really not to hold that over their head. They didn't choose it. They didn't ask for it. I mean, if it's something they're dealing with, it's like, to be respectful and to be, sensitive to that. I mean, because the reality is that it is a very tough condition to live with, especially if it's untreated. I mean, it can be really painful emotionally and mentally, and very distressing. And so understanding that but on another level, we need to understand that with OCD, whatever the person thinks the fear is, right? Or whatever they're obsessing about is almost never the actual issue, right? So if your partner is obsessing about the relationship or about you and trying to substantiate the relationship and trying to analyze you aren't the issue. Okay. Your relationship probably isn't the issue either. And I know this might be difficult, but I really would encourage you not to take it at face value. And it's like, I know I can speak into this having done this for a while, but most people that I work with or come into my office or whatever, when they tell me that they're obsessing about whatever that content is, it's almost never the issue, right? So if someone is telling me they're afraid of getting AIDS, and so they spend 3-4 hours washing their hands each day, well, I don't see that as an AIDS problem, because they don't have AIDS. Right? They don't have a disease, right? The problem is that they have a fear of something and they're reinforcing it. And so we need to break that loop, right? And the same goes for relationship OCD. Now, most of the people that I've worked with relationship OCD, usually their partner or the relationship is actually not the problem, right? The person becomes anxious about a situation with the relationship or with their partner. And again, they're trying to substantiate it, right? The anxiety that they're experiencing is actually an issue. And then they start doing these compulsions, which makes it worse. And realizing that if your partner has OCD, if they're really lost in that OCD loop, it's almost as if there's this lens over their eyes and they're not seeing the world as it really is. They're not seeing you or your relationship as it really is. And when they're seeing it in a distorted fashion, they're trying to fix it. They're trying to fix something that's not broken, right? Someone who's washing their hands again and again is trying to protect themselves, but they're not actually in danger. And so I would really encourage you not to take it personally, right? And not to look too deep into the idea of what they're obsessing about, because the overwhelming probability is that it has nothing to do with you or your relationship. It has to do with the fact that that person has OCD primarily. And if it locks onto the relationship, chances are they'll tell you, that I hear this again and again, there's nothing wrong with my partner relationship, but my mind just keeps looping about it, right? They're trying to solve the problem to the best that they know how, but it's making it worse often over time, which is why it's important that they're getting help, right? And they're getting the professional guidance they need. When you are faced with a question from your partner, or if something's seeming off, right? And if your partner is, seeming distant or seeming more like they're just in their head, like ruminating on something, even surfacing those conversations and asking them is this part of OCD, right? And as a significant other, it's okay to be involved in treatment. In fact, I often really encourage that, right? Because if you're their loved one and their primary support system, it's important that you know what treatment is and how to support them. Right. And having that open dialogue of hey man, is this part of your OCD right now? Right. And having those open, honest questions is okay. And you don't need to know, and trust me when I say this, you don't want to know every thought that your partner has. Okay. In fact, it's usually harmful, if you start digging into every thought, just like you probably don't want your partner to know every thought in your head. Right. The thoughts are not the issue, right? What the issue is are the compulsions that are being done that are reinforcing this loop. And so as the partner, yes, it's important that you understand OCD. It's important that you aren't reinforcing it, that you aren't making it worse, right? It's important that your, significant other is getting the help they need. And it's also important that you aren't taking it personally. If they do struggle with relationship OCD specifically and they're getting help, chances are it's not you or your relationship that's the issue. It's the OCD that's the issue, and remembering that, right? And then, being supportive on their journey is kind of the final tip that I want to share, because as a person who's gone through OCD, as a person who's married, with my wife, and, we have a baby, and it's like, we have a, wonderful relationship. I mean, part of it is like, just a lot of transparency and just being open and honest. And that's a very important part of a relationship. Now, it doesn't mean about everything, but like with thoughts, like every thought that pops into their head, but they need to feel supportive and encouraged on from their spouse, and that's a really important aspect. And so when you can start not to take it so personally, especially if it's about your relationship or you, and they're getting in their mind about it, realizing that it's OCD, and then figuring out and learning how to support them. And if you can get guidance even from their person they're seeking help from, that's really important too, right? And over at restoredminds.com, we have resources as well for that. We have a lot of, we support a lot of family members, of people who deal with OCD, because we know OCD is not just an individual issue. It's a family it's a family issue, it bleeds into the family, to the relationship, to kids and workplaces and so on. So we obviously want to support everyone at every level that we can. And so that's really all, that I have for this particular episode right now. So just to recap, understanding OCD, not reinforcing it, understanding that lens of OCD, understanding that your partner isn't seeing it how it really is, and really encouraging them and supporting them on their recovery, and realizing that they can recover, and making sure they're getting the right help that they need. And, again, if you're looking for more resources, we have some right down below in the notes for you. We have some free guides and assessments as well as, our private community, where we have live calls where you can get some expert guidance on how to support loved ones as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. And I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope to see you soon. Take care.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you found it helpful, chances are someone else will too, and we'd really appreciate your support by liking and subscribing, and also sharing this video on your social platforms. Also, if you're looking for additional help, we have some resources right down in the links below to help you on your journey. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you soon.